I just finished watching episode 8 of From, and honestly, I don't think enough people are talking about what happened between Tabitha and the man in yellow. Because the more I think about that scene, the stranger it becomes. For years, we've looked at the man in yellow as one of the biggest threats in this entire story. Every time he appears, something bad follows. Every time people get close to answers.
Knowledge comes at a cost? That's why they wrote it.
He shows up. Every time somebody starts pulling on the threads, holding this mystery together, he's somehow connected to it. So, naturally, when he appeared again in episode 8, I expected the same thing. A threat, a warning to back off.
Then why am I here?
You're here because you're about to do something you've never done before.
Maybe even another attempt to stop Tabitha from digging deeper. But that's not really what happened. And that's exactly why I can't stop thinking about it. Because if you pay attention to what he actually says, it doesn't sound like someone protecting his own interests. It sounds like someone trying to stop a catastrophe. And those are two completely different things. The more I replay that conversation in my head, the more I keep coming back to one question. What if we've misunderstood the man in yellow this entire time? Not completely. Not enough to call him a hero, but enough to realise that his role in this story might be very different from what we've assumed. Because after episode 8, I'm starting to think the biggest mystery isn't who the man in yellow is. The biggest mystery might be what he's afraid of.
Did the totem work? Did it work?
No.
And if the man in yellow is afraid of something, then we should probably be terrified too. Let's start with Tabitha, because everything in this theory begins and ends with her. One thing that's becoming impossible to ignore is how different Tabitha's journey has been. Think about everything she's experienced. She escaped. Actually escaped. For years that felt impossible. People talked about leaving. People dreamed about leaving. People died trying to leave. Tabitha did it. Then she came back, and somehow that might be even more important, because escaping didn't free her from the mystery. It connected her to it even more. Ever since then, it feels like the town has been treating her differently. The children appear to her, the visions find her, the clues seem to lead her specifically toward answers, and now the man in yellow himself is personally warning her. That isn't normal. Nobody else gets this kind of attention. Nobody else seems to sit at the centre of so many moving pieces, which is why I think the conversation in episode 8 is much bigger than it first appears. The most interesting part isn't that the man in yellow shows up. The interesting part is how he behaves. Because throughout the series, mysterious figures usually operate through fear. They threaten, they manipulate, they push people in certain directions. The man in yellow does something different. He gives Tabitha information, he gives her a choice, and that's what keeps bothering me. If his only goal was maintaining control, why even explain anything? Why not simply stop her? Why not remove the threat entirely? We've seen powerful forces inside this town do terrible things before. Yet this time he chooses a warning instead. That feels deliberate. It feels like somebody standing near the edge of a cliff telling another person to be careful. Not because they care about the person, because they know what happens if someone falls. And suddenly that makes the children's bones far more important than we realised. For most of the season, the assumption has been pretty straightforward. Find the truth. Find the bones. Help the children. Break the cycle. Simple. Except From has never been a show that rewards simple answers. Every time a mystery gets solved, 3 more appear. Every answer opens another door. And episode 8 may have quietly suggested that we've been asking the wrong question. Maybe the real question isn't how to free the children. Maybe the real question is what happens after they're freed. Because those are not the same thing. Think about the location, the chamber, the roots, the bottle tree. Everything about that place feels intentional. Nothing about it feels natural. It's almost like the entire environment was built around containing something, holding something in place, keeping something hidden. And that's where this theory starts getting really interesting. What if the children aren't simply trapped there? What if they're part of the trap? What if the chamber isn't a prison for them? What if it's a prison created by them? Suddenly, the warning makes a lot more sense. Because removing something from a prison isn't always a rescue. Sometimes it's a release. And horror stories have taught us that releasing ancient things rarely ends well. Actually, it almost never ends well. And honestly, Ethan's storyline might contain one of the most important clues in the entire episode. On the surface, the conversation with Victor is heartbreaking. It's a child asking how to survive, a frightened kid trying to understand what happens if everyone else disappears. But the deeper meaning is much darker. Because Victor doesn't respond like somebody imagining a possibility. He responds like somebody remembering one. That's a huge difference. Victor has always felt like a living memory of a previous cycle, a person carrying knowledge from a version of this nightmare that came before. And every time he talks about survival, it sounds less like speculation and more like experience, which raises an uncomfortable possibility. What if Fromville really does operate in cycles? What if Victor wasn't the exception? What if he was simply the survivor of the last reset? And what if Ethan is being positioned to become the survivor of the next one? The more I think about it, the more that idea keeps showing up everywhere, ends, until now. Because according to the man in yellow, Tabitha is approaching something that's never happened before. That's the part people should really focus on. Never happened before. Not rarely. Not recently. Never. In a town built on repetition, that's a massive statement. It suggests Tabitha isn't just another participant in the cycle. She's disrupting it, and disruption is dangerous, especially in places that depend on routine. Let's talk about Boyd for a moment, because I think his storyline connects directly to all of this. Episode 8 spends a lot of time showing how exhausted Boyd has become. He's carrying the weight of everybody else's survival, everybody else's fears, everybody else's expectations, and it's breaking him. The title itself points us in that direction. Heavy is the head. Leadership has become a burden. And one thing I've noticed throughout From is that the town seems to target people who create hope. Boyd creates hope. Tabitha creates hope. Even Jade, in his own chaotic way, creates hope through answers. The moment somebody starts pushing back against the mystery pushes back. It's almost like the town has an immune system, an automatic response designed to eliminate threats. And if that's true, then Tabitha may currently represent the biggest threat the town has ever faced. Not because she's strong, not because she's fearless, because she's getting closer than anyone else. Closer to the truth, closer to the center, closer to whatever the man in yellow fears. And I genuinely think people might underestimate how important his vision was, because Henry is offered something almost irresistible, a perfect reality, a peaceful reality, a reality where everything is okay. That's a recurring pattern in From. The town doesn't just hurt people, it studies them, it learns what they want. Then it uses those desires against them. We've seen it happen again and again. Characters are tempted with comfort, with answers, with reunions, with hope, only to discover that the offer comes with a hidden cost. That's why Henry's vision feels so disturbing, because it proves that whatever controls this place understands people remarkably well. It understands grief, it understands regret, it understands longing. And that suggests a level of intelligence that's far more sophisticated than simple monsters lurking in the woods. Which brings us back to another question. Who is really in charge here? The creatures certainly aren't. The monsters feel more like soldiers than generals. They follow rules, they perform functions, they serve a purpose. But purpose usually means somebody designed it, somebody benefits from it, somebody oversees it. And every season, the man in yellow looks more and more like a candidate for that role. Except episode 8 complicates that idea. Because if he's the one in complete control, why does he seem worried? Why does he sound uncertain? Why warn Tabitha at all? Unless he isn't the highest authority, unless he's answering to something else, something older, something more dangerous, something buried beneath everything we've seen so far. That's where the children's chamber becomes incredibly important. Because the deeper the series goes, the more it feels like the monsters aren't the final layer of the mystery. They're simply one layer, a frightening layer, a deadly layer, but not the deepest one. There are older forces at work here, older symbols, older rituals, older secrets, and I think Tabitha is getting dangerously close to uncovering them, which may explain why the man in yellow finally stepped in, not to stop her, to prepare her, because if she continues down this path, She's going to discover something that changes everything, something capable of reshaping how we understand the entire series. Then there's Fatima, and honestly, every episode makes her situation more alarming. At this point, normal explanations don't really work anymore. The physical changes, the medical impossibilities, the connection to Smiley, all of it suggests that whatever is happening goes far beyond illness, far beyond pregnancy, far beyond anything ordinary. And I keep coming back to the same disturbing possibility. What if the line between human and monster isn't as clear as we've assumed? What if transformation has always been part of the cycle? Think about how little we actually know about the creatures. We know what they do, we know how they behave, but we know almost nothing about where they originally came from, what created them, what changed them, what turned them into what they are now. If Fatima's storyline is heading where many fans think it's heading, then we may finally be approaching answers to those questions. And those answers could completely redefine the mythology of the show. Because if monsters were once people, then escaping Fromville becomes much more complicated. Suddenly, the battle isn't simply about survival, it's about preventing transformation, preventing the cycle from claiming another victim. And once again, that circles back to Tabitha. Everything circles back to Tabitha. The children, the chamber, the warning, the visions, the escape, the return. Every major mystery seems connected to her in some way, which is why I think episode 8 quietly revealed something huge. The future of Fromville may depend entirely on a decision she hasn't made yet, a decision that nobody else has ever reached before. That's why the man in yellow looked different during that conversation. Not weaker, not friendlier, different. For the first time, it felt like he didn't know what was coming next. And that might be the most important clue in the entire episode, because mysterious figures usually thrive on certainty. They know more than everyone else. They understand the rules, they understand the game. But this time, it felt like the game itself was changing. The board is changing, the cycle is changing, the story is changing, and Tabitha is standing right at the center of it. So when I look at episode 8 as a whole, I don't see a setup episode. I see a warning episode, a warning that we're approaching the point where everything starts converging. Boyd's collapse, Fatima's transformation, Ethan's future, Victor's memories, Henry's visions, the children beneath the tree, the chamber, the man in yellow. All of these storylines are moving toward the same destination, a choice. And based on what we've learned, I don't think that choice will simply determine whether people escape. I think it will determine what kind of world exists afterward. Because there's a real possibility that the thing trapped beneath Fromville is worse than Fromville itself. And if that's true, then the man in yellow's warning suddenly becomes a lot easier to understand. Maybe he wasn't threatening Tabitha. Maybe he was begging her to understand the consequences. And honestly, that's a far scarier possibility, because villains are predictable. You know where they stand, you know what they want, but somebody warning you about a disaster they can't control, that's terrifying, because it means the disaster is real. And after watching episode 8, I can't shake the feeling that everyone is focused on the wrong danger. The monsters aren't the biggest threat. The town isn't the biggest threat. The biggest threat may be whatever has been hidden beneath everything from the very beginning. And if Tabitha uncovers it, she may finally save everyone. Or she may unleash something that makes every nightmare we've seen so far look small in comparison. And judging by the look on the man in yellow's face, even he isn't sure which outcome is coming.